Jade City by Fonda Lee, book one in the Greenbone Saga, has appeared on a ton of top fantasy lists over the last few years, especially if you've been around the booktube space for a while. And I know why. I finally got around to reading this. This has been one that has been on my radar for a long time, but it's always one of those ones that got kicked down the road, been on the TBR for a hot minute, but I saw that it was available at my local library. Of course, we've always got to be supporting those local libraries, and figured I would pick it up and give it a read. And oh my goodness, what an amazing palate cleanser. I've been reading so many really big epic fantasy books or massive sci-fi series this year, and it is so cool to sort of distill it down into, well, while it has some really intricate fantasy moments and it has some really interesting complex sort of like urban fantasy some elements to it as well, it's really just a story that breaks down all the good and the bad that is rife in humanity. And what better way to distillate that than in a classic mobster story? Because that's what this is at the end of the day. Here for Jade City, book one of the Greenbone Saga. If you enjoy these kind of, dedicated book reviews, this is going to be a spoiler-free book review. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I still love doing like single individual book reviews. I mean, yeah, you come up with top lists until, the cows come home, but I still just like talking about individual books. So if you're a fan of this kind of content, of course, be sure to let me know down in the comments. And if you have read this, if you've read the whole series, let me know what you think. Do keep it spoiler-free. Because, well, I guess a little bit of spoilers for you. I really enjoyed this first book. I thought this was such a great look at a world that I have never really seen portrayed in fantasy like this. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about Jade City. So like I said, this has some urban fantasy elements, but not in the way that I think a lot of folks would expect. When I think of urban fantasy, you have to think of books like the Dresden Files, which, while yes, they do integrate magic in a very integral way, really do come down to sort of the sort of folklore elements, the mythos and the monsters and the cryptids and all that kind of fun stuff. And this book didn't do that at all. This book was about people. It was about the good and the bad. It was about passion and commitment, and I think really above all, family. And this was such a fun, character-driven story wrapped in a shell of, again, a world that feels familiar in so many ways, but it believably is shifted and changed by the nature of the magic that is involved. So this book follows sort of a core cast of characters. There's actually sort of five main characters. Four of them are sort of related into this one family, the Call family, which are the leading family of the No Peak clan. Now, this all takes place in sort of a pseudo version of Japan, basically. And they're basically a Yakuza family. And it sort of follows their issues and rivalry and political machinations and conflicts and struggles with the Mountain Clan, which is run by the Eight family. And it fundamentally follows sort of this country that has thrown off the shackles of oppression and colonization, and they're these sort of two budding sort of pseudo warlords that arose, and they joined together in glorious purpose. And after the war ended, they stepped back and they let sort of government take over and democracy take over, and they founded these sort of two founding clans. And while for a long time these two, hard men were allies in so many ways, they sort of drifted apart over time in their views on how this country, Kekon, should sort of integrate itself with the broader world, because they have a resource that other people don't have. And that's Jade, the quintessential Jade of Jade City, and folks who can utilize it, leverage its magical capabilities and powers, which is what it has in this world. And those folks are Greenbones, people who can use, control, and manipulate the powers of Jade. And a lot of the thing that sort of drove these clans apart has to do with how they think Jade should be utilized, both by foreigners, because that is sort of a whole component of this, but how the trade should be managed and all this other stuff. And it sets up sort of the modern generation with the main sort of three characters that we follow are these three siblings. Lan, who is the pillar of this family. He's now become the head of the clan. He's stepped up. He's still relatively young. I think he's like 34, 35 at the time of the book. And he's taken over from his grandfather. Their dad passed away. And, sort of stepping into the shoes of what it means to be the head of this clan. And I say clan, like, think of it as like classic sort of, big mobster, stereotype, Yakuza stereotype, but take it up to a whole other notch. They are integrated in every level of everything from local businesses to, this takes place basically in one big city, but to municipal government and federal government. I mean, the Mountain Clan and the No Peak Clan are you're basically one or the other. Like there are some smaller clans that are involved and are mentioned, but most people are in some way affiliated with one of these two main clans. And their strength and health and survivability and how their politics are at play and how their businesses are at play and their trade and economics really impacts the country as a whole. So has like broad global ramifications, like this amount of crime family that's so powerful that it has an impact on a global scale. I mean, I think you have to think about the drug cartels of like Latin America and stuff to really sort of come close to that in sort of our real world sort of equivalency. And there are real world equivalencies drawn, and you don't want to do it just because it's sort of Asian inspired fantasy. You don't want to always draw comparisons to things like the Poppy War. But I think while that book really pulled from like specific moments from real world history, I feel like this did this a little bit less. I think there are countries in this that are meant to be more analogous to countries in our real world, but done in a more sort of general way. And maybe again, I'm not someone who's familiar enough with the very complex and nuanced histories of like Japan and Korea and China. So maybe there are some more specific things that are referenced here. I'm not 100% sure. It felt a little bit more general. And what I think was really cool about this book as well, as sort of finish up talking about the setting, is that it dives into like sort of like 60s, 70s kind of Cold War era. Like they've got like, they wear suits and they have sort of like more modern cars and televisions and radios and phones and guns. And to have that all wrapped in a world where people can control Jade and the magic of Jade, which basically gives you superpowers. And like there are disciplines and stuff and all these other things, but really it comes down to sort of, at a base level, it makes you superhuman. So it's such a fun way that all these things are blended and meshed together. And I think that Lee, through her phenomenal writing, was able to weave a world that actually makes sense given the fact that you do have a small subset and cohort of people who legitimately have magic powers. And what was really cool about this too is how the magic system is integrated in everything, both from the hierarchical structures of the clan down to the average, street thugs. We do see that as one of the POVs, all to the way that, the idea of, I think it's a golden green or, golden jade or whatever should be kept separate. The whole idea that people who have this immense power, shouldn't put themselves in positions of power in the government. And I think the way the world building was drip fed to you so beautifully. The magic, there's no like, I sit down with the wise mentor and they explain the magic system to me. Looking at you, Kelsier and Vin, they don't have that Mistborn moment in this. Like there's like an offhand comment about, the 6 disciplines of Jade. Okay, and he steeled himself. Wait, it's not just like metaphorically, no, like actually making your skin tougher with steel, or lightness so you can jump high in the air, or spreading out your metaphysical perception. Okay, now we start to learn more about this with channeling and healing and all this kind of stuff. And it was, I think, again, I talk about wrapped in the shell of sort of Lee's prose. This is my first book that I've ever read by her, and I want to read more. Her writing is it's so efficient, yet just poetic enough to sort of take it up that one notch. I mean, people give Sanderson a lot of crap for their prose, myself included. And, but the one thing you have to give him tons of props for is that he's a very efficient writer. It's really easy to pick up and read. This book has a lot of those key elements. I would even maybe akin it more to a Le Guin in that way, where you still have that sort of element of poetry and that one step further, those really nice scene setting moments. No white rooms exist here. You really get this sort of strong feeling when you walk into a scene and see the setting and the characters. But it's never to a point where it drags down the plot. Let's get back to the plot. We talked about Lan. He's sort of the head of this family. He's dealing with some stuff. Scuffles are breaking out on the streets. Businesses are sort of, getting broken into. There's scuffles over territory. So he turns to his younger brother, Hilo, who is the horn of the clan. So you have the pillar and the horn. The horn is sort of the military leader. And these clans are big enough that they would warrant having military leaders. And basically all these folks are greenbones. You've got fists and fingers and all this sort of levels of hierarchy and all this kind of stuff. But basically, they're their mob enforcers, and they're going around and making sure, companies and businesses are paying their tribute on time and all that sort of stuff. And sort of it follows their initial back and forth, and follows the character POV in the first chapter, actually, Biro, who is just basically a street thug, someone who has the ability to use Jade, but has not had any of the training that goes along with being a proper Greenbone, has not gone to one of these sort of clan sanctioned training academies. And he sort of goes to try and steal some Jade for himself. Even a tiny chunk of Jade can basically completely change your fate. That's how well controlled this resource is. And ends up totally failing. It changes his life for the worst. And so you get the views of these totally high end, like most rich and powerful people in the country, and you contrast it to this low level street thug just trying to get by. And I love the way that Jade utilized these multiple POVs, or sorry, Lee utilized these multiple POVs over the course of this to see the effect of Jade on different people, because Jade does have an impact. Bloodlines are super important in this because while yes, some people can utilize Jade, some people utilize it a bit too well in that they can't really control it and tame this crackling, ridiculous energy that runs through you when you touch it, to the point where it basically acts like a drug. They can get addicted to it. They get the itches. They want to rip their own skin off. It's like coming out from the inside, and they can go insane, either kill themselves or others, and get very dangerous in the process. Whereas in some people, what they would call stone eyes in this culture, basically can't interact with it at all. The rock is functionally inert. And talking about how these sort of different types of people are sort of integrated in society together. And ideally, the best bloodline is someone who, doesn't go all out, has some sense of temperance and control, but obviously is still powerful enough to hold a ton of Jade. And that's a big thing here, is about, winning Jade through ritual combat, how much of it you have. It's all about the wealth and the status symbol for these clans. The last sort of main character in this regard of the three siblings is Shay, the youngest sister of this sort of trio, this triumvirate. She comes back from overseas, basically, I think what was basically meant to be Europe. She'd ran off with a young man, things didn't necessarily work out so well, but she ended up getting a really good education, and she's come back and basically trying to decide if she still wants to be integrated with the clan at all. She's trying to do everything under her own steam. And I think she was probably one of my favorite POVs to watch in this, because I feel like she's one that a lot of people could relate to, especially young people or Gen Z millennials like ourselves, probably a lot of people watching this, facing different points in your life where you go, like, this is a turning point. Like, do I take this new job? Do I move to this new city? Do I do this new, being near your family, moving away from them? I think is something that a lot of us can relate to in a lot of ways. So it was very, very cool to sort of see her perspective as someone who's familiar with what's going on, but is coming back with a fresh perspective. The last POV character that we deal with is Andon, sort of the young, he was kind of a pseudo cousin who was sort of brought into the family when his mother kind of went crazy from Green. And we follow sort of his adventures in the academy. And it's basically just he's kind of like a savant, basically. And they're sort of grooming him to sort of come into the clan and the family, and sort of seeing his different POV in this. All wrapped in this idea that the clans things aren't going quite right. Jade's maybe going missing. Businesses are sort of under threat. There's a lot of movement on the other side, and setting up what is potentially a clan war, and the implications that'll have, not only for the country and for the world, because they are very much expanding their control of Jade, how it's going to other countries. Other militaries are starting to use it. There's a drug that's developed that allows other people to use it like they do, and maybe not quite so good a way, and maybe with more of a cost. And the way the politics are woven into this book are fantastic. There's a moment in this book where they're trying to track down these different Jade shipments and all their stuff. And they're talking about like the purchasing of like large digging equipment and how that cost is going to be like amortized across multiple years and getting back ROI. And I'm sitting there, I literally turn to my girlfriend and I go, how does someone without a business degree understand? For context, I have a business degree. I'm like, this is the most I've used it in years. What's going on? It's a joke if my bosses see this. But I was like, wow, like Lee is not afraid to just give it to you. Like, this book does not handhold. And I do feel like, I'm not the only person I think who feels this way, the books have maybe not been dumbed down, but maybe have been streamlined and simplified, and there's more handholding that's happened in the last few years, especially in the fantasy side of things. This book doesn't do that. It makes you pay attention. It makes you look for little things. It makes you look for small, nuanced world-building elements and how they tie into the greater plot. And again, all wrapped in what is essentially a fun, it's a Yakuza story all about the honor and family and pride and clan, but also, the underground. And these people aren't necessarily good by any means. They're still mobsters. And so to see, to make you root for these characters that are kind of corrupt and are like not good necessarily moral, but maybe they are, because they're still helping and supporting their businesses and the way they still view and support their family. And there's so many great morally gray elements to this. And then again, combined with a magic system that makes sense. Again, it's got its pros, it's got its cons, it's got its costs and stakes. Like, but again, you are fed it as you need it. And again, wrapped in a world that I've never seen a pseudo fantasy style, 1960s Tokyo. I've never seen that. That's sick. Nothing even come close to that. So it's very, not just another fantasy story set in New York. We love that. So no, I think if you're someone who hasn't picked up Jade City and you are a fan of fantasy books, especially urban fantasy, but I even think if you're someone looking for a bit of a break from high or epic fantasy or sci-fi, I would check this out. I really enjoyed this. I thought the writing was phenomenal. And I definitely want to read more books by Fonda Lee. Obviously, I think I'm going to continue on in the Greenbone Saga, but if there are other books from her that you would recommend, definitely let me know down in the comments. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe. If there's a clamoring for it, I might do more reviews for the later books in this series as well. Go full spoiler on those. So again, yeah, let me know down in the comments, and I will see you next time. Cheers.